Blasphemous is set in the deeply religious land of Custodia, drawing heavy inspiration from Spanish Catholicism in its world and imagery. Custodia is very clearly a land of suffering and misery, with corpses littering the landscape, and the few who've been spared usually meeting with a much crueler fate. Custodia has an obsession with sin and penance. The character you play as is literally called the Penitent One, or Penitente, and there's imagery of punishment decorating the entire game. It's such a painful game to look at, yet really, really beautiful. The pixel art is detailed to such an impressive extent that it brings the fantastic character and environmental designs to life perfectly. I genuinely think the enemy design here is some of the best I've ever seen in a video game. Blasphemous frequently draws inspiration from the residents of hell depicted in Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy, echoing their fascinating descriptions. Giants who lurk inside bells, men who've been split in two, nuns who mask their seared faces with gold. Each and every enemy in the game has such a creativity to their visuals and the horrifying fates that have befallen them. These designs are easily matched, if not surpassed, by the environments. Each level in this game is enchanting yet terrifying, as if the world itself has let the mask slip. Winds sweep through desolate mountains, crucified sinners litter a path to a giant bell, a hallway is filled with callbacks to classic art. The lands of Custodia are holy indeed and make for a really pretty game to look at. Even as someone who doesn't always jive with pixel art, I found this game gorgeous. Gameplay-wise, Blasphemous can pretty firmly be classified as a Metroidvania. Now I'm gonna be frank, I don't really like Metroidvanias a whole lot. I find a lot of them make themselves out to be these huge sprawling worlds that let you carve your own way, but end up being a lot more linear when you scratch beneath the surface. Usually there's only one path to progress, with alternate routes leading to dead ends or disappointing rewards. In Blasphemous, even the side paths are fun to follow through on because the things you get in return are actually interesting. You can get beads which provide you with little bonuses, such as the beads of red and blue wax, which you slowly build up throughout the game. The calcified eye, which lets you see health bars, or the pelican effigy, which breaks the entire fucking game. You can also find prayers, which serve as little spells to cast, sword hearts, which usually provide you with some sort of bonus at a cost, or the relics, which bring forth parts of the world you couldn't interact with before. The coolest thing about these items is that they each come with little lore pages told from the perspective of different characters, granting everything you collect that much more intrigue. I find these things so much more rewarding to find than some quarter of a health upgrade kit because they lend the world some history or provide a unique gameplay quirk. Even when I find something like a bone, which is next to useless on its own aside from a quick glimpse of lore, I'm still happy to have found it. I'm thinking, oh wow, I'm glad I made the effort to follow this path because someone else could have very easily missed out on it. Nobody misses out on a fucking quarter of a health upgrade kit. And sure, Blasphemous also has those sorts of things, but they're broken up by these smaller, almost quaint collectibles. I'll take a fun but useless item over a useful but boring one any day. As a Metroidvania, Blasphemous naturally has heavy platforming elements. While most platforming in the main game is relatively simple, the game really starts to shine in this regard in some of its optional challenges. As a tie-in with Bloodstained, Blasphemous' second free DLC, Strife and Ruin, adds challenge levels. These require a lot of precise timing and strategic jumps and make for some of the most fun sections in the game. Given that platforming usually takes a bit of a back seat in Blasphemous, these levels are a breath of fresh air. They require use of several mechanics introduced throughout the game, like wall jumping and hopping across lanterns, and only here does it feel like all these little aspects come together to create a really high quality platforming challenge. Perhaps one of Blasphemous's most prominent aspects is its difficulty. In fact, if you're a fan of these sorts of words, you might even call it a Souls-like. From the one last chance to get all your shit back mechanic to the lore tucked away in item descriptions, it's clear that the game draws inspiration from the Souls series. As such, it places a lot of its chips on its combat. Blasphemous's combat is simple and sweet. You've got a selection of extra moves which are all useful under certain circumstances, but you'll primarily be using your normal attack. I think a huge part of what makes attacking satisfying is the sound design. Every slash lands with a slick slice of flesh or a resounding clang against metal. The soundtrack is fantastic too, and really hammers the fantastical setting home. Visually, the animation in Blasphemous can be utterly brutal and makes the combat that much more exciting. You don't just kill enemies in this game, you fucking eviscerate them, lending you a sort of mini power trip. No matter how many times you get your ass kicked, you can still brutalize your enemies in a horrifying fashion. Blasphemous really busts out the spectacle in regards to boss fights. These are the moments when it feels like everything comes together. The soundtrack, the enemy design, the difficulty, all swirl together, creating these absurdly intense battles. Without a doubt, Blasphemous' crowning achievement is Chrysanta of the Rapt Agony. Chrysanta challenges your skills on a foundational level. Where other bosses encourage you to make good use of movement, sliding, and jumping around the arena, Chrysanta forces you into parrying most of her moves, meaning the instinct you've developed up until this point can fuck you over. She's easily one of the hardest bosses in the game, yet her challenge has been very strategically designed, making for a really engaging fight. As mentioned previously, each item you collect comes with a page of lore, serving as a little self-contained story. Reading about the adventures of others who came before you in bite-sized chunks is a lot of fun and something a lot of games could take a cue from. I love interconnected lore, but sometimes people don't want to earn a fucking degree to understand why the world is the way it is. That's why Dark Souls lore works so well. If you're not down to tackle everything at once, that's fine. Go learn about the tale of Artorias and the Abyss, or Slave Knight Gale's quest to fetch pigment for his lady's painting. When a game has smaller scale, standalone stories, it can ease people into the universe instead of just dunking them in the deep end. While Blasphemous does a lot right, it does sadly feels like it never quite reaches the peak of its potential, although all of its free updates do help quite a bit. A lot of the beats are just fine, some of the bosses are just fine, you get the gist. It's not that Blasphemous does a lot wrong, it just feels like it doesn't do things right enough to warrant the title of masterpiece. That's why I think the promise of a sequel is really exciting. I look forward to seeing more stunning levels and crazy boss fights and a more expanded world. This is a really impressive first outing from the Game Kitchen, and I have nothing but anticipation for the next game. I'll give Blasphemous an 8 out of 10.